Alright everyone, it's time to talk about how Biden has stabbed the left in the back. I do support this, by the way, because everything that the left touches turns to shit. Now, the leftism is a crippling cancer that should be shooed aside and ignored. We should not give them any representation because they only represent greed and stupidity. That being said, Biden's infrastructure bill in focus here being shrunk massively by hundreds of billions of dollars in an olive branch to the GOP, which like the left is like, no, you can't do this, you can't negotiate, end the filibuster and just pass it yourselves. Yeah, that's a great way to get stomped in the midterms and have the bill torn apart retroactively. That kind of partisanship is literally a poison within Congress. Here's the thing. In government, you have to actually make deals with other people that represent constituents that fundamentally disagree with you. Leftists don't understand this. They prefer autocracy. Now, first and foremost, there will be a pinned comment down below if you're watching this video on YouTube with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. I make 4 videos a day, only 2 end up on YouTube. YouTube abuses people at this point, so there's no reason to prioritize it. Also a link to Substack. Keep in mind I do journalistic content. Did an article the other day, actually, a funny one. The first and foremost, most important thing that Biden has axed from the infrastructure bill, again, we can use that term only very, very loosely for sloganeering purposes. It's not really about infrastructure. It's not really about putting Americans to work. One of the first things that Joe Biden did upon assuming his asterisk administration was canceling Keystone XL. While encouraging the Russians to build their gas pipeline, Americans aren't allowed to have one. It's going to go over well in the midterms, by the way. He decided to axe something important from that bill from the left, which was a $10,000 write-off for student loan debt. This would apply to everyone. I think it's scaled by income, which is like, haha. Basically, screw people who have done marginally well, who have only marginally more wealth, by the way, than people in lower classes because of the structure of the economy. Fuck someone making $90K a year. They can deal with that $100,000 of debt. Anyway, I'd like to point this out. I do not believe in writing off student loan debt. Before people jump down my throat, I have several tens of thousands in student loan debt. I don't want the government anywhere near it. I don't want them to touch it. Let me take care of it myself, because when government comes and says I want to help, usually it wants to stab you in the back. No thanks. Fuck the leftists. But this was already a negotiated thing in the infrastructure spending. In fact, Biden risks alienating elements of the left that he would need to pass the compromise bill. This could get very messy. Here's why. With Joe Manchin in the Senate, much of this sort of stuff can only be passed if you have a few Republicans join you. But you also need in that total all of the further leftists. And Schumer wanted a total write-off. Warren wanted, and Ken Kamal and some wanted a 10K cap. And then the Cringe Fringe wants a total write-off. The Neolibs wanted nothing. And then you have a meet in the middle sort of strategy. And they're like, well, will you vote for this if instead of just canceling all student loan debt and universal everything free, 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 in other words, let's be Venezuela only with a more diverse economy, as a compromise, we'll give 10K in relief to these students. Then they can restructure with lower payments and stuff. And basically it was a lukewarm compromise with the left. That was among Dems. That was between the center-left, like neoliberal crowd, and the Cringe Fringe, the Geek Squad, the Cringe Fringe, the Grift Left, idiots like that, the commie bloc. So they made a compromise. Now they have to compromise with the Republicans, but the problem is the 10K write-off is incapable of getting past them. They're not going to vote for it. Mitt Romney is probably the only one that would cross the aisle. With a filibuster there, you therefore don't get your bill at all, and you get nothing that you wanted. The problem for Biden is that this is going to cripple his reputation with the left, because that specific part of the bill, this was arguably the big one for the left. Even beyond like healthcare and stuff like that, arguably student loan was number one. Think of all of the like the millennials and even now Gen Zers that voted overwhelmingly Democrat, and they were told they were going to get all this free shit, and now Biden has stripped it mostly out of the bill. Note what's still left in the infrastructure bill, though. Plenty of money for corporate kickbacks and pork barrel bullshit, another presidential museum or congressional library extension, things like that. Great way to get all of those under 30 leftists to stay aboard the Democratic Party. They take it for granted. It's beginning to stop working. You see this happening with the GOP too. People have stopped playing the neocon versus neolib game and endorsing a bunch of supposedly unelectable populists that keep kicking everyone's ass. Well, the left is still growing. Keeping that in mind, it's going to be very, very messy in the midterms, I think. So Biden has done exactly what I predicted he would do, which is swing massively back towards the center. He did this initially, the first time he did this was gun control, ironically enough. And Biden is an anti-gunner. I consider every gun control to be blatantly unconstitutional. My hope is that the Supreme Court sides with that basic premise in several upcoming cases, thus massively expanding the ability of citizens to defend themselves properly and defend their nation properly. But Biden is not... He's not cripplingly anti-gun in the Feinstein sense. He's a classic neoliberal. He's like, well, I want a little more incremental gun control. Sort of like the flip side of a neocon. Well, I want incrementally a little bit less. But all the other gun control that exists is fine. Just don't add any new stuff. What did he do? He campaigned on, he campaigns on banning fracking. That's not going to happen. Not that it's capable of being enforced anyway. He campaigned on banning the AR-15. Now his proposal, which is massively watered down, is, hey, if you got an AR-15, you have to pay a tax. We're going to tax your sporting rifle. Not that it would actually get through SCOTUS. They'd shoot that down in an instant. Can't convert a right into a privilege. Whoops. Now, Biden knows this. That's why he's not pushing it too hard. You're going to pay a tax on these expanded magazines. Whatever the fuck that means. It depends on current technological limitations. Now he's done this. Supposedly Biden's, and he campaigned on this. This is Biden's own words. I'm going to get rid of your student debt. I'm going to cancel student debt if I'm elected. Well, he got elected, honk honk, totally fairly, by the way. Now, no student loan debt forgiveness. Well, that's funny because millions of people specifically voted for him just for that. For the free shit side of leftist economics. But Biden never endorsed them to begin with, and I love it. On Afghanistan, Biden the peacemaker, supposedly. He's got the left right now breathing down his neck on this and the issue of like Israel and Gaza because of his statements there. He's a relic of a time in which the Democrats endorse the kind of things he's currently doing. What he doesn't realize is it's not the 1980s or 90s anymore, and there's a core element within the party, a rising and relatively strong one, of extreme leftists that are not going to accept this. The problem is he's trying to make deals with the Republicans, which, I mean, you have to get a deal at all, but there's this group within the party that represent extreme leftist districts and extreme leftist constituencies that are paid not to negotiate at all. To be clear, AOC is doing her job. She is representing the will of her congressional district. It is extremely far left. It would be difficult for an Elizabeth Warren leftist to get elected there at this point. She is a socialist. She can use whatever moniker she wants. She is a socialist. Bernie Sanders, doing a great job as a senator from a state that voted 65% Dem. And that was down, by the way, year over year. Keeping that in mind, things like this are one of the reasons why. The left has been stabbed in the back. I support it. I support stabbing him in the back harder. I support completely ignoring the wills of people like the Geek Squad. They should be blocked out of politics entirely. The entire country should unite against them. But they're there. Biden still has to deal with that fact. The buck stops there. Ultimately, he takes the blame for this. He just axed probably the most significant proposal made by even in some cases, not even by far left. Schumer was championing this. Pelosi largely was on board. So in order to get the Republicans, he'll throw the Republicans under the bus and say, well, I couldn't get it past them. I had no choice. I don't know that that's going to work, though. A lot of them would rather him just pressure Manchin into voting to end the filibuster, which isn't going to happen. Because, again, he's representing his constituents. This is part of the problem, arguably, but also one of the interesting virtues of the current political system, the one that we've been using, which is that you've got these different states and districts. They have different groups of people with different economic needs, different racial demographics, different age demographics, different amounts of GDP. Everything about them is different, more urban, more rural, and so forth. Some of them are gerrymandered, both left and right, by the way. The Democrats don't admit to that very often. You got the situation with all of these disparate groups. Ultimately, in politics, in the Senate, you have to have, you have to get past the possibility of a filibuster potentially. In the House, at least a simple majority. You get 51% of people on board and you're good. It can really hamstring things and requires a great deal of negotiation. But there are people in government that are terrible at negotiating. The Tea Party locked things down, by the way, in the past by not being willing to negotiate on a lot of things too, really creating a problem for the Obama administration. This time it's coming from the left within the Democrats' own party. The Republicans are like, yeah, we can make a deal. Yeah, whatever. All the neocons, at least. Bitch McConnell's, Turtle Man. And the far-left Democrats, though, howling with rage. You can see them have breakdowns on Twitter over this. It's epic. It's excellent watching the commies cry because they're not allowed to steal from the middle and working classes as much. That's about all. Peace out.